out to see how things are in New Zealand. Right now, what we're seeing is the support offered by the New Zealand Defence Force is actually meeting all of those task needs that are coming in from NEMA. What we're doing is a needs assessment in the region to determine whether or not that there's any specific capabilities that we might need or any further personnel that we might need. But at this point in time, we're currently okay. But we'll be making that decision in the next couple of days, and then if there is a need, then certainly we'll be reaching out.
So with the extra police that are going in, why is that? Is that because of looting and crime, or is it to help with going door to door? Can you just give us a bit more information about that and where they're going to as well?
So obviously police are one of our key agencies when it comes to first line response in a major disaster like that. So we'll have some police who are pretty tired and who have been working some pretty long shifts. So that extra support will be able to relieve some of those who need a break, but also provide that extra support, because when you've got things like traffic management in place, roads are closed and so on, that requires extra police manpower. I just want to be clear, though, that sadly, in a disaster like this, there is occasionally some people who use that as the opportunity for opportunistic offending. The police have been very clear that they are going to crack down on that hard. So now is not the time for anybody to think they can chance their luck. The police are going to be out there visible and active, and anyone who's breaking the law can expect to face the consequences of that.
Minister, you mentioned saw the devastation obviously in Gisborne. What did you think, and what was it like to sort of see that for yourself firsthand?
Look, it was a pretty moving morning. Obviously, flying in over Gisborne, it was clear the extent of the damage even before we'd gotten off the plane. A lot of water still there, damage on the beach actually on the approach into the airport. And then going and visiting people's homes, going and visiting the evacuation centres, being in the centre of the town, it is clear that there are some really big challenges facing that community at the moment. Some of those we'll be working hard to try and address as quickly as we can, like giving them some connectivity, making sure that they've got access to water just for basic day-to-day use. Getting the water supply back up and running clearly has to be a major priority. That's not going to be an overnight fix, so we'll be supporting them in the meantime until that can be done. I just want to acknowledge how difficult it is for those communities who have been affected by this weather event. The sorts of things that they were reporting back to me included that they felt very isolated, they felt very alone. That unfortunately is the nature of the initial phase in some of these events. But I just want to acknowledge how hard that's been for them. I think now that we are able to reconnect with them more easily, we can get more support to them.
Why does that have to be the initial reaction? Why do people have to be isolated? Why can't we be, or why weren't we prepared for something like this in those regions?
Well, I mean, if you look at some of those areas, they were just under a huge amount of water, and so it just wasn't possible to get to them, though the focus was on getting them to higher ground where they could be dry. And then once some of the water had subsided, we were able to get to them and provide that additional support. In the case of electricity, for example, weather will knock out electricity and from time to time. We can build the networks as resilient as possible, but there will still, on occasion, be outages. The key thing that we've got to do is try and get them reconnected as quickly as possible. And yes, there will be an opportunity to look at whether we need to build more resilience into the networks and more contingency into the networks for future events.
Minister,
yes.
Questions, Prime Minister. How people that are waiting to get information about missing loved ones and that sort of thing, how long will they need to be waiting, basically?
I think when telecommunications are resumed, a number of themselves, because people will be able to get in touch with loved ones. Police are going through a process at the moment of prioritising all of the information that they've got. So they'll be looking to make sure that they're removing duplicates, that they are narrowing down to those where there are serious concerns, as opposed to ones where they're just a case of people not being able to get in touch with each other. And then they will proactively follow up, including going door to door and doing those kind of things to make sure that they're finding people.
Do you have any overall view or sort of number of the amount of people that there are, very serious concerns for versus people that are maybe just phones dead and they can't make contact?
No, police still haven't put a particular number on that at this point.
What Hawke's Bay, just a few questions related to that region. People are desperate to know the latest out of Eastdale. Were the reconnaissance flights a part of that? What's the latest picture that we have in terms of the damage there?
We do have some real concerns about that area. We've got USAR teams up there at the moment, basically going door to door and doing a search and identifying the extent of the damage and the extent of any human harm. At this point, we haven't had report backs from those teams yet, but it is an area of significant concern.
And the Hawke's Bay Expressway, in terms of that being the primary link between the two cities, that was open earlier today, and then it was closed, with Waka Kotahi saying that they may be able to reopen it tonight. Is that still your understanding of people being able to travel between those two cities? And what's the advice for those that have travelled across the bridge and are now stuck away from their home and unable to get back?
Yeah, so obviously follow the guidance of Waka Kotahi. It really underscores the message, though, if you don't have to travel and you're somewhere safe, just stay where you are. Because if you're returning home and you're happy to stay home and you can get home, then and your home is safe to be in, then that's one thing. But now's not the time to be doing any unnecessary travel where you might end up being stuck somewhere. In some cases, Waka Kotahi are opening roads on a limited basis in order to allow for those essential lifeline supplies to get through. One of the reasons that they're doing that, though, is that they're then closing them again. One of the reasons that they're doing that is they want to actually be able to reopen them as quickly as possible. So by closing them, then they're actually able to get the work done faster. And so they want to be able to open roads as fast as they can, and that means limiting the amount of time that they've got traffic on them so that they can get the repairs done as quickly as possible.
And we're expecting more rain overnight in the Hawke's Bay region. What is the advice there, and what's your message to people that are anxious?
The advice is the same as it's been right the way through. Be prepared. We're dealing with very unpredictable weather at the moment. It is certainly likely that there will be more rain. That's what the forecasts are suggesting. So as we've said right from the beginning, if you can stay put, stay put. Make sure you've got what you need in order to stay put if it's safe to do that. And if you need to evacuate, be prepared and be ready to evacuate as well. So clearly that involves you grabbing, making sure you've got something warm and dry to wear, and that you've got a plan.
In terms of connectivity, though, in the region, people having phones that have battery to get those civil defence alerts to evacuate. Are you confident that those that may need to evacuate, when they're told to, will get those messages? Because we've got different reports about how connected people are in that region.
Yeah, well, for example, in some of the communities that I spoke to today, they were going door to door to make sure that people got the message about needing to evacuate. And in the process of doing that, they were able to identify people that needed extra help with evacuating. Communities are coming together, managing this incredibly well. I acknowledge that where decisions are being made often in really difficult circumstances, sometimes in the middle of the night, and where communications are limited, it is going to be a very basic response. Then it might be people going door to door to tell people that they need to move.
The Australian support, can you just clarify, is that 125 people total coming, and is that what you've asked for?
That's 25 at the moment, so that's 25 in total. We'll continue to talk to them, and if we need more, I'm sure that they will send more. At the moment, I guess the get people here as quickly as we can. Some immediate kind of search and rescue, or particularly search jobs that we will be looking to get help with.
What impact the assessment team actually do?
They'll basically be going and looking at, they'll be looking for people, if people are missing. They'll be looking at buildings, so whether they're habitable or not, and providing that intel back that's going to allow assessments about what areas need to stay evacuated and all of those sorts of things.
Can I just clarify why it'll take a couple of days for you to respond to Australia? I mean, we're in one of our biggest natural disasters. We've been hearing it for several days from the podium. Would it not be a good idea to say, yes, please, we would like the help? Or is it something that you feel like, what's the hesitation?
Well, perhaps if I could start with the search and rescue teams. We've already indicated, yes, we would like to accept that. Now, I don't know whether the number is dictated by them or by us at this point, but clearly we want to make sure that anybody that we do bring over from Australia, we have something for them to do. And I can tell you that those people will be deployed as quickly as possible as soon as they get here to deal with a very immediate need. In the case of the in the case of the Defence Force, I can tell you, as someone who's been watching all of this, everything that we're asking of the Defence Force, they've been able to deliver for us at this point. But
I think it's as simple as that. I mean, as you've seen, the New Zealand Defence Force routinely deploys to other nations and assists, and we've got no hesitation in seeking that help if it's required. Right now, as I'm saying, we are covering those tasks with the specific capabilities and the depths required. If it's clear that actually the scale and the scope and the duration looks like it's going to be quite a lot longer, we'll obviously reach out.
I mean, clearly it is going to be quite a lot longer. This is not a short-term thing, so would we not be, from an outside perspective, wouldn't it seem that we would say yes please to any help that's offered, and for people who are in desperate need on the ground, we can fire in a whole lot of resource?
I think it just comes back to those tasks that we've been tasked through NEMA. If it's exhausting our requirements, we'll ask for it, but right now we're just not seeing that.
We'll come back on the Chatham Islands. Are the Chatham Islands okay?
I haven't had an update today, but my understanding is that the weather pattern, by and large, skipped them. That was the advice that we had yesterday. I haven't had any updates today, so I'm sure we would have heard if that was not the case.
Do you want me to go? You go. The USAR work in the Esk Valley, the door-to-door exercise, how long is that expected to take?
I don't know. I don't have an estimate of time. Obviously, it'll take as long as it needs to take, though. Joe.
As civil defence and fire and emergency, and anyone really who is going around trying to tell people that they need to evacuate still or may need to, are they getting any pushback from people, or for the most part is it people who are accepting that needs to happen?
The feedback that I had on the ground today was that people were by and large accepting that it needs to happen. Of course, in any situation like this, you do hear of the odd occasion where people want to stay put. Generally speaking, communities have been quite convincing and encouraging people of the need to evacuate. So I haven't been made aware of any examples where people have really dug in.
It's on the uncontactable people, and you mentioned that there's obviously a prioritisation that's going on there. Presumably, the people that are the biggest priority are probably in areas that aren't easy to get to
That's
either.
Right.
So, I mean, are there potentially whole households that it may be some days, if not weeks, before there actually is access if they're up in like high farmland, etc.?
The police have indicated that they're going to prioritise those more remote and isolated people if they've got reports that they are unable to be contacted.
And is that a case of choppering people in, basically?
We'll leave that decision to the police. Obviously, they've got some resources of their own. They've got the police Eagle helicopter heading down there tomorrow. But also we have used, where necessary, military resources to assist with rescue operations.
Luke, you talked about some of the areas that have gone on to the recovery phase and the ones that are still in the emergency phase. I guess the main ones being sort of tied up in Edmonds Bay. How long do you expect them to remain in the emergency phase, sort of based on the work at the moment?
I mean, clearly there are some big challenges ahead. They need to re-establish transportation links. They need to get the power back on, and they need to get a good level of telecommunications restored before they're able to kind of start moving towards recovery. I don't have time estimates for all of that. I know from what I've seen in Gisborne today, for example, getting water regularised again, fresh water regularised again, could be very challenging. The water reservoir is quite a long way out of the city, and there's extensive damage to the pipelines between it and the city, and so that's going to take some time to resolve. But they are working on alternatives. So I just couldn't put a timetable on it, though.
And the other thing is, obviously, there's a lot of agencies, both in the emergency response and then the recovery response, who've been spending, quite a lot of their budgets on this stuff. Will they be looking to get top-ups? Like will you be looking to give them top-ups in cash so that they can then also carry out their other tasks?
Look, we'll be absolutely making sure that we see New Zealand through this. It is a significant event. It is, on a scale of what we've seen with the Christchurch earthquake, for example, and it's going to take some time to work through it, and we will absolutely see this process through. We're working through at the moment advice around just how best to structure the recovery effort. Clearly there's some existing provisions in law to transition from a response to a recovery, and we're working through those options at the moment.
You have a number on the
Yes, down the front.
Some of those more isolated communities up around the East Cape, which are physically cut off and their bridges washed away. What have you heard from those areas about the situation there, and any plans to get supplies into those areas?
As I've indicated, the feedback that we've had so far is that we've managed to get supplies by and large to those communities that need it. and that actually some limited land transport has now been re-established to most areas, but that may be only for essential supplies under escort, which is what has been happening in many areas. But we will continue to make sure that where we identify areas that have been isolated and that need supplies, that we find a way of getting the supplies to them.
Do you have a number on that?
Outages, so it seems like each day we're seeing that number reduce of people without power. Is there any rough time frame for how long it's going to take to restore power to most people?
I don't have a particular time frame. Clearly, probably the biggest bulk now of those who are without power are in the Hawke's Bay area, and they're throwing everything at it.
Do you have an update on the number of displaced people?
I'll have a look and I'll come back to that, but because I think I might do. But
have you had a health update yet? On the number of people who may be injured or in hospital?
I don't have a number. In terms of injuries, no. In terms of the overall health system, the feedback that we've had is that the health system is functioning well, that the hospitals are open, that primary care is by and large functioning well and is well provisioned in terms of the supplies that it needs, so we're not dealing with any critical issues there. But there is some access issues in terms of physical access to hospitals, for example, and the hospitals are working with primary care and with St John's to make sure that they can provide, acute care where it is required if people can't get to the hospital. In terms of the number of people displaced, I knew I had the number here. We've got approximately 3,187 people, and there were an additional 800 evacuated households in Auckland and Northland.
Can you guarantee that everyone who needs one has a bed?
That's a difficult question to answer because in many cases people are finding alternative accommodation off their own bat, so they might be going and staying with friends and family and so on. What I can tell you is that there is still capacity in the evacuation centres that we've got set up. And so we monitor that closely, and where we need to add extra capacity to the evacuation centres, we do that. But there will be people who have made their own arrangements, and I just couldn't put a number on that.
So there seems to be a reliance in some areas on Starlinks. Do we have enough in New Zealand? Dr. Shane Reddy has tweeted at Elon Musk today asking for more. Is that necessary? The
advice that I've got is that there is a reasonably good supply of Starlinks in New Zealand, and as you've indicated, I think the big challenge at the moment is just getting them to the places where they're needed. So we've been dispatching them over the last 24 to 48 hours, and that's going to continue. They're not going to provide a complete answer though, but they will provide a limited amount of connectivity in those areas that are currently cut off, and that will hopefully allow us to at least establish some of those basic communication channels.
Last time you were standing here, one of the issues was around attrition in the Defence Force, particularly around the MIQ. Is that still an issue, and is it highlighted with big events like this when you really need all hands on deck, if you like?
What you're seeing out there is trained, motivated men and women of the Defence Force doing exactly what they wanted to do when they joined up. And I think we should be all really proud of what they do for us every single day. As I've spoken about tonight, we're meeting all those tasks already. However, attrition is an issue, and it affects not just the Defence Force. I think it's probably fair to say if there's a sustainment and a duration challenge into the future, that would be a challenge for us, and that's exactly why we have close relationships with our international partners.
How's it tracked since COVID? Has the attrition been better?
Attrition has increased in the last couple of years. I think we're probably here mostly focusing on the initial response to Cyclone Gabrielle, but there are a range of initiatives underway to try and bring that back around.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up shortly, but I'll just do one last sweep of questions. So yeah.
Are there any communities, like talking small little hamlets, that you haven't been able to reach yet? You're still holding concerns for?
It is quite possible that there'll be some smaller communities that haven't been reached yet. That is exactly what the focus is at the moment in terms of getting those door-to-door search teams out there to help make sure we're identifying any that have been cut off.
There's a growing number of banks that are either predicting or calling for the Reserve Bank to just hold fire on an OCR raise next week, given the huge impact of the cyclone. What would your call to the Reserve Bank be about that?
Look, I'm not going to provide the Reserve Bank some feedback. That's probably a better question for the Minister of Finance. I'm not going to give feedback, but I'm sure that it's something that they'll consider. Yeah.
Civil Defence staff in the upper North Island have reported low levels but sustained levels of abuse. People are really stressed out, strung out, anxious. Could you just speak to sort of social cohesion, the need for it, and give some like reassuring words for those that have been under the pump for weeks and weeks now and are at breaking point?
Well, first of all, I want to, on behalf of the whole country, thank all of our first responders, whatever agency they're coming from, and say thank you so much for putting yourselves out there and doing a really critical job at a really critical time for New Zealand. In terms of the New Zealanders that they are interacting with, let's all acknowledge that people are under an enormous amount of pressure, and sometimes when some of the things that those people will have done aren't necessarily things that they'll be particularly a break here. But my message to everyone is try and stay calm. The people who are you, the people who are trying to help you. And so give them a break too. They're working long hours as well. I know that not being able to communicate in this era in which we're so used to being able to communicate with easily is adding a whole new level of complexity and stress for people. We're working as hard as we can to fix that.
What's the plan for
I'll tell you what,
refreshing the front?
you can have the second to last question and then you can have the last one.
Is it fair to say that the impact of this event will require a significant adjustment to the forthcoming budget, and would that require adjusting your operating and capital allowances?
Look, I think it's going to require a significant investment over quite a period of time. Clearly it's going to have an impact on this year's budget because there will be immediate needs that we're going to need to accommodate. But as I indicated earlier today, we're also going to have to think about the long-term implications of this. We have some infrastructure in New Zealand that we're going to need to look very closely at. We're going to need to think about our roading network, our telecommunications network, our energy distribution networks, and make sure that we have them as robust as possible. We are going to see more of these types of events, and making sure that we are prepared for them is going to require a significant amount of time, energy, and investment.
Yeah, just back to the sort of the front line. So what are the plans to like refresh those front line who need a break? Is there any, sort of forethinking into how you then sort of refresh it and make sure that people aren't getting burnt out?
So that is happening on an agency by agency basis, and the Defence Force have been very helpfully helping to move people around the country where necessary to provide relief. So as I've said, we've had emergency response teams coming up from the South Island in order to head into some of those hot spots in the North Island to help relieve some of that pressure and give people a break. And we'll continue to do that. Police are bringing people in from other areas. Fire are bringing people in from other areas. So agency by agency, they have plans for this. They've got their plans well developed, and they are absolutely implementing them. Right, thanks everybody.
With just the last one. If energy companies, electricity companies are charging customers who do not have access to power at the moment, and are they? Do you know if they're still charging them?
Answer on that specifically, but what I would say is my expectation is that electricity companies will act responsibly in these circumstances.
What do you mean by act responsibly? Not charge people when they're not receiving power?
Look, I'm happy to look into that more, but I certainly expect electricity companies to be good social and corporate citizens. Thanks, everyone.